In our panel to help break down how Chicago did this week in the World Spotlight, WBEZ City Government and Politics reporter Mariah Woelfel is here. Hey, Mariah.
Hello.
So good to see you.
You too.
Lynn Sweet, Washington Bureau Chief for the Chicago Sun-Times. Welcome back to the recap, Lynn.
It's an honor to be back in Chicago and to be in this studio with everyone.
And Nader Issa is here, education reporter for the Chicago Sun-Times. Good to see you again, Nader.
Hey, we finally made it.
Finally made it. Yes, Chicago was at the center of the political and media universe this week. How did we do, Nader?
Well, I think it did turn into a bit of a spectacle, and there was certainly a lot of energy and commotion and liveliness inside the United Center and outside too. It definitely showed Chicago on the world stage.
What's your reaction to how things went down, Lynn?
Inside the convention hall, things went perfectly in terms of the logistics, which, if anyone who's listening said, but wait, I heard there were lines and this and that, it's minor in comparison to the program being pulled off in a spectacular way with a lot of surprises. And the convention, in terms of helping elect Harris, was absolutely expertly targeting and messaging and reimagined in a way to make it more engaging. Example one, the dance party roll call.
Yes, for sure. We'll get more into that. What did you think about Chicago being in the spotlight this week, Mariah?
I agree. And I think that's the general consensus from people I'm talking to this morning, that it went off mostly without a hitch, both inside and outside. Inside, yeah, like Lynn mentioned, there were crowds, but eventually they opened back the doors. They got the lines moving at some point, even though there were long waits, even for credentialed media to get access to the floor.
Are you talking about floor passes or going through security?
I'm talking about both, but mostly floor passes. Last night it was very overcrowded.
Yeah, I saw your tweet.
The floor.
You tweeted a photo, didn't you, Mariah?
Yeah, it was pretty, pretty overcrowded. They had the fire marshal had to shut the doors. They weren't letting delegates who were on the floor out to use the bathroom. But I think generally it went over well.
Yeah.
By the way, that's why I saw when I was over by the Illinois delegation earlier, and I saw someone there, and it was real early. It was during the Pink sound check, which was really pretty cool, by the way. I didn't know it was going to happen. But you take your moments when you get them. And I said to this delegate, "Why are you here so early?" And she looked at me. She said, "Lynn, it's Hunger Games tonight."
Oh my gosh.
I asked an alderman. I was like, "Is there a seat over there? Could you like squeeze me in near the Illinois delegation?" And he's like, "I think you have a better chance. I have a better chance of getting you on the next flight to NASA than anywhere near this section."
Wow.
Yeah. But just so people know, credentialed reporters had plenty of seats to watch this if you're not on the floor.
And there were
Plenty of
15,000
seats.
reporters from across the country. And so maybe that's something the DNC, considers the next time, is if they credential that many reporters or credential social media influencers again, like they did today, or if they save that space.
Well,
But there were plenty of seats.
Yeah.
And hundreds, maybe over 1,000 reporters were also out in the streets too. It was pretty packed out there for the protest.
Why was it packed? Well, because last night was the big night. Kamala Harris spoke. How do you all think she did?
I spoke to Illinois delegates and Democrats afterwards, and they were largely jubilant. They thought that she really the salient point that I got from most people were that they were inspired and thinking about how they want to get out the vote now. I talked to one Chicago alderwoman who's like, "I'm trying to map out how I can get volunteers to start going to swing states. I might, take a trip to Wisconsin to try to rally votes." And so I think she did a good job, from a local perspective of rallying the Democratic troops here to start, working up energy among voters. There was a raucous applause when she, hit her main message of "we're not going back." That seemed to really resonate with Illinois Democrats. And there was also a huge applause when she called for the peace and dignity of Palestinians. That was the other large applause moment. And she did it right seconds after saying that she'll never stop helping Israel to defend itself.
Yeah, she played that fine line.
She walked
there.
a really fine line on 2 points that many would see as conflicting. I would think. I spoke to Representative LaShawn Ford, who afterwards said he was nervous at first when she brought up the topic and came out, really strong. But then he thought that she brought it home in a really good way. I spoke to Stacey Davis Gates, the president of the Chicago Teachers Union, who said she wished Harris would have been a little bit more strong denouncing Israel's actions since October in the war in Gaza. But overall, from Illinois Democratic's perspective, it was a success.
Your thoughts, Nader, on the speech?
I was outside covering the protests, and I think from that perspective, the last point that Mariah raised is what people outside were paying attention to.
That's what they were talking about.
Yeah, and I can also say after the United Center let out, after Harris finished her speech, we saw delegates walking past Union Park where these protests were held, and people looked really excited, really energized. They were all carrying their Kamala long blue signs. And it seemed that that energy was sort of flowing out of the United Center, and folks seemed wanting and ready to support the vice president.
We also heard from a lot of Illinois politicians at the DNC this week. Let's walk through how they all did, starting with Mayor Brandon Johnson, who welcomed the delegates to his hometown Monday night.
Together we can build a better, brighter future. And there's no better place to start that than right here in the greatest freaking city in the world, the city of Chicago.
Biggest takeaways from his speech, Mariah?
He seemed nervous. He was shouting the entire time.
Was he?
And I tried to, break the mold afterwards. He was doing national TV hits after, and I tried to, ask him how he prepared. Was he nervous? What did he think right immediately after getting off the stage? And he couldn't be shook. He was on his national talking points of how it's so important to rally around Harris right now. He did say that he prepared quietly through prayer. But I think he did a good job. He hit on a main point of this convention, which is a strength of holding it in Chicago, is the long lineage of Black leadership that is so intrinsic to the city's history. He talked about Jesse Jackson, Ida B. Wells, and then he brought it home to himself, tried to make that link, saying that, this wouldn't be possible without organizing and the people who led the steps before him. He referenced his little daughter who was in the stands watching Braden and said how she'll have, an example to look up to in Kamala Harris.
Mm-hmm. But here is what he did. I did talk to his people on this. The point of this convention and the way he's trying to help elect Harris has nothing to do with the speech. He was one. As long as this was not a split-screen convention where you had total riot, out-of-control stuff, the good thing is lots of protest, peaceful, First Amendment rights respected, but nothing that rose to the level of someone's giving a speech and outside action, throughout. But what he's also doing is he already made one trip to Detroit. He has other stops already set up. Mm-hmm. He's going to be part of the Black Men for Harris movement, which is the way the campaign is organized, one of the very powerful segments of how they're slicing and dicing the population.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That he is stepping up into that, I think, is more indicative than his speech was, which, by the way, I want to cut him slack. Everyone's not Oprah, Michelle Obama, and Barack Obama, and Hillary Clinton.
Right.
Okay? Of course.
When you speak to a big arena, it's really difficult. I believe he had practice in the practice podium behind the stage, but there's really nothing that could set you up in the way when you walk out there. So the groundwork he's laying, and what's interesting to watch, and I hope that the people based in Chicago keep up on, is exactly what he's doing and how what he does on the road may be different or whatever here. Usually mayors of Chicago do better when they're out of town than in town because there is not the many questions put at him about the real important, crucial issues before the city.
Yeah. Yeah. Johnson talked, Mariah, about wanting to rebrand Chicago. And as we know, despite the fact that his name looms large over the loop, former President Donald Trump has often disparaged Chicago, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I think we saw that that same card
continued.
from the Trump Vance campaign this week, which of course Chicago leaders will fire back against any chance they get. Johnson had a lot of good one-liners. He said the Republican Party is as useless as a hotel card key after you check out. He said watching the only thing more painful than watching the Republican Party is watching breakdancing at the Summer Olympics.
That's a good line.
It's a good line, but maybe controversial. I saw some people tweeting like, it wasn't that bad. Come on, it's interesting to watch.
Yeah. Well, another Illinois politician catapulted onto the national stage this week, at least more than he already was. I'm talking about Governor J.B. Pritzker. During prime time on Tuesday, he highlighted his accomplishments and got a few laughs at Trump's expense.
We eliminated the grocery tax. Donald hasn't been in a grocery store since his first bankruptcy. Illinois invested in clean energy and the jobs it brings. Donald claimed that windmills in the ocean made the whales a little batty. During COVID, we supported small businesses and jobs. And Donald told us to inject bleach.
Okay, so this was the most high-profile speech of his career, Lynn. How did he do?
Delivery, B-, script, B+. His other things he was doing in the convention and in the run-up, A+.
Tell me why.
Why? Because the vault, if you say, for him never came. He was not put on the vice presidential ticket. So for the moment, he already has a high profile, and he did fine. I just think, as I look at these things, it's really hard just to do good. It's extremely difficult to do good in these circumstances. You have to do the right speech. You have to
It's a lot at stake.
And he is a very good speaker. He is a warm, engaging person. So I think the speech was pretty good. And, of course, he has the most memorable line that take it from a real billionaire to one who's not.
Yeah, let's play it for those who might not have heard it.
Donald Trump thinks that we should trust him on the economy because he claims to be very rich. But take it from an actual billionaire. Trump is rich in only one thing: stupidity.
Nader, he seems to have really embraced this billionaire role, hasn't he?
He has. And I mean, I think a lot of our reporters pointed out the sort of awkward moment when Bernie Sanders came on and said billionaires shouldn't be able to buy elections. And some saw it as a shot at Governor Pritzker. Some sort of saw it as the usual Bernie talk. But it is a little bit, unorthodox to be in a liberal space, a Democratic space, and be bragging about being a billionaire. There, especially the past, 10 years, there's been a lot of talk more so about billionaires and their involvement in politics.
But I think he's leaning into it.
He is, of course.
This is so. It's like
he's trying to sort of laugh at himself a little bit
isn't
about
it?
it.
Yeah,
Let's have
making himself
some
part of the joke.
compassion for this billionaire, just trying to make the best of it. Okay,
Benevolent billionaire.
I just
This
don't
poor
see any
billionaire
more from
just
this
trying
show.
to make the best
Can't we?
of an unfortunate
Right.
situation.
I mean,
Yeah.
I thought, this is just me, I was hoping for a little bit more punch with his line saying he's only rich in one thing. I thought stupidity didn't exactly land.
Okay.
But otherwise I thought it was a well-written speech that definitely had a lot of jabs at the former president.
If you're just tuning in, this is Reset. I'm Sasha-Ann Simons, and we're going behind the headlines in the weekly news recap with Lynn Sweet and Nader Issa of the Chicago Sun-Times and WBEZ reporter Mariah Woelfel. All right, two of Chicago's most beloved political faces. We know they made a big impression Tuesday night on the convention crowd. Let's start with First Lady Michelle Obama. I mean, did she not bring the house down, Mariah?
Yeah, I thought she was an incredible orator. She's an incredible orator. I talked to people who were like, she was better than, Barack Obama.
I mean, he said as much.
Yeah. And she had that one, like, just really good knockout line of, maybe the job he's seeking is the black jobs he talks about.
Right.
And, that's been a repeated comment of Trump's. And I thought it was a really witty clapback.
She emphasized Kamala Harris brought hope back to the Democratic Party. I mean, did you all get that feeling during the week? You were there every day, inside and out, that Democrats were just really energized by Harris and Walz. Was it feeling that way?
Absolutely. So when President Biden announced on July 21st that he would not seek another term, everyone who I interviewed talked about a physical sense of relief and moving on. And because things coalesced around Harris so fast, and everyone who was paying attention saw this now can happen, every data point, the money, the crowds. So instead of coming into a funeral, people were coming into a celebration. And that was very much the vibe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was asking delegates on the floor yesterday, like, do you think that this type of energy would have been possible if Joe Biden were delivering this? And in my head, it's like an absolutely not question, the answer. I mean, delegates were pretty tame in their response. But you think about all of the things Harris unlocks, especially at a convention in Chicago, as themes that she could talk about. We already addressed, the lineage of black leadership that she now gets to,
Right.
It gets to be a major theme of the convention. Also, the we're not going back, we're moving forward. These are all things
Do
that,
something.
Yeah, I think her team has kind of struck gold with that you wouldn't be able to do with Biden.
With Biden, for
Also,
sure.
just think of the entertainment. So I'm going to use, again, the dance party convention here. You do that. One, Harris has her own moves. She's pretty good. Okay? So you can understand that the entertainers, the DJs, the cultural stuff happening around in terms of coming down the aisle, doing this and that, works with her a lot better than it would have worked with President Biden.
I would say, did we even hear a Charlie XCX song at any point during inside the convention?
That's a good question.
Oh, was there supposed to be?
Well, there's just this supercut of Kamala Harris that has gotten a lot of attention among young voters, and it's just her it's all the videos of her dancing.
That's my point.
Yeah.
You could do something with that, and that's the difference. We probably don't have time on this show, but when you're trying to appeal to voters, you have a candidate now who is fluent in more generations than President Biden would have been. And even if it would have been the Biden-Harris ticket, she couldn't do her stuff like that in the way that she can do it now and have it have the same impact.
Yeah.
Maybe we can bring all of this back together. The breakdancing at the Olympics, President and Vice President Harris's moves. We've seen the former President Donald Trump's moves at his rallies where he very gently shakes from side to side. They can have a dance-off instead of the next debate.
Exactly.
Oh, my gosh.
Well, before we take a pause, I know a lot of other Illinois politicians, they were also given the chance to speak at the convention this week. Among them, Senators Dick Durbin and Tammy Duckworth, Representative Lauren Underwood, who's the youngest black woman elected to Congress, and former Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger last night. I mean, what stood out for everyone?
Actually, and Congressman Raja Krishnamurti.
That's right. What stood out to you, Lynn?
Well, Adam Kinzinger's speech, which came up, they put him close to Harris's, was pitch perfect in his assignment to speak to Republicans. He's a conservative Republican. He was on the January 6th committee, but you didn't have to explain the backstory. He was there to say why you should not vote for Donald Trump and why, if you are conservative, you could put your policy differences aside in terms of saving democracy. And then he went on and did it, and that you should put, and this is his signature phrase, and that you need to put your country first.
Yeah. What did you catch this week, Nader, and what stood out in these speeches?
Well, I think one of the things we already talked about was the mayor, Brandon Johnson. I think that sort of set the tone for a really, as Mariah said, he was shouting a very energetic time. And I mean, the same thing we've talked about with the Obamas. I think they really stole the show. Every group chat I was in, social media, everybody's talking about the Obamas. People even said that, Michelle should have been the closer of the whole convention. And so I think a lot of the people with area roots, with Chicago and Illinois area roots, really delivered.
Yeah.
So one thing that was interesting, if I could go back to Michelle Obama, so in 2016, it was when they go
Low, we go high.
not
Yes,
this week.
That's a really
We're
big
done with
point.
that. We tried that.
Yeah.
We've been there.
Yeah, she went into a lot of was very honest about Trump disparaging her family
And
Yeah.
over the
she-
years.
And this is something people have asked for since 2016 when Trump sort of was first introduced to the political scene, maybe a few years earlier, of like, don't take him seriously as a candidate. Don't take him seriously as any old Republican is what people have asked for. Go on the attack, call him the names that people want to see him called. And I think both Obamas did that. I mean, even Barack Obama with his crowd-sized joke and his hand
Yes.
gestures,
Oh.
that really went on the attack in a way that we haven't seen before.
Oh yeah.
Also, just in case the audience doesn't get it, you were very kind.
Remember, this is a
Now-
daytime show, Lynn.
No. Okay, so there is, when you're talking about crowd size, everybody who's listening, put your two hands together and then either take them big or little. This is, I believe, a universal gesture most understood best by men.
Our panel today, WBEZ City Government and Politics reporter Mariah Woelfel, Lynn Sweet, Washington Bureau Chief for the Chicago Sun-Times, and Nader Issa, Education reporter for the Chicago Sun-Times. Now, Nader, you were following those protests during the week. Just walk us through some of the larger gatherings and incidents.
Yeah, there were every day of the convention, there were protests out on the streets, most of them for Palestinian rights. They have been organized for months.
Some started even before the convention,
Yeah,
right?
the March on the DNC, that's the big coalition that came together. They organized the protests on Monday and on Thursday. They started planning before October 7th even happened. So it tells you how far back it goes and the sort of diversity of issues that these groups came together for. But since October and since we've seen what ensued in the months after, they decided to all focus on Palestinian rights as the core issue. So they drew out thousands. I don't think the crowd sizes got to what they expected on Monday and Thursday, but there were thousands in the streets undoubtedly, and I think they really made their voices heard.
So Tuesday night, there were dozens arrested in a protest that was outside the Israeli consulate. What was that scene like?
Yeah, so that day and that group really contrasted with the sort of Palestinian organizations, Muslim, Arab organizations that organized Monday, also a really big protest Wednesday, and then last night on Thursday. The group Tuesday, they're called Behind Enemy Lines. They're sort of an anti-imperialist, really more aggressive and militant group that protests, a wide range of issues. They're really just anti-government sort of. And they organized this thing on Tuesday outside the Israeli consulate on Madison Street, which is also home to Ogilvy Transportation Center. So police showed up in real force in preparation for that. I mean, even 2 hours before it started, there were hundreds of officers. And at some points in the night, there were confrontations, there were scuffles, pushing, shoving between this group and police. And I mean, you look over at one point and there's 8 rows of police officers lined up, blocking off each side of Madison. So it was a little bit jarring seeing so much police presence and also seeing this group that was a lot more aggressive than the quote family-friendly protests that organizers planned for Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday.
What did Chicago Police Superintendent Larry Snelling have to say about the arrests?
He tried to draw a distinction between that group, which it seemed that there were some people too on Monday at the March on the DNC protest. They sort of splintered off, and they're the ones who breached the security fence just to the north of the United Center, a couple blocks away. Superintendent Snelling tried to draw a distinction between the two. He really wanted to say that if people want to express themselves peacefully, they have that First Amendment right. The police are only there to sort of overlook things and make sure nothing gets out of hand. but that if people are coming, they want to confront police, they want to vandalize the streets, this, and that. We're not going to let that happen. We have to protect our city. The sort of usual police speak that you would hear.
Yeah. Chicago police were under a lot of scrutiny, as we remember, leading up to this week. So, Lynn, Mariah, how do you all think they did?
Mayor Johnson commented on this morning. He's doing a bit of a victory lap at the press conference that he's holding with emergency management and police officials. And he said something along the lines of, if 1968 convention is remembered for police abuse, then the 2024 convention is going to be remembered for constitutional policing.
Right.
Nader was obviously outside and could speak to what he saw more. But, I don't think that that's immediately, like a wrong comment.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that has been the result of lots of work in the months leading up to the DNC, where the police were negotiating with the Consent Decree Coalition, the coalition of community organizations
Mm-hmm.
that oversee the federal consent decree, over the mass arrest policy, over, what constitutes, nonviolent civil disobedience versus, violent, rioting. And I don't know if we ever got an answer to that question. So there were a lot of, questions in the air about how the police would make those determinations. And I think that this is where Johnson's role in this convention really shines, is his connections and relationships with the protesters and the organizers who led the march on the DNC. They spoke to Nader and I for various stories where they said stuff along the lines of, this would look very different, I predict, if Mayor Lori Lightfoot were mayor or Mayor Rahm Emanuel were mayor, because we don't feel that they are allies in this fight in the way that we feel Johnson is.
Yeah.
And we feel that he is genuinely and sincerely negotiating with us over a protest route. And so we're going to genuinely and sincerely negotiate with him as opposed to attacking the city politically. And so I think that's where Johnson does deserve a lot of credit in how the DNC went off.
No, what I want to hear from you, Lynn, because you covered the Republican convention in July as well. So, from your lens, how did the protest scene in Milwaukee compare to what you saw in this city?
Well, I don't like to talk about things I don't know about. I was in both conventions inside.
Okay.
And not outside. We had a terrific team in Milwaukee covering the protests, and we had a much larger team, obviously, out here between the combined WBEZ Sun-Times forces. So I defer to my colleagues.
The protests in Milwaukee were a lot smaller, and you've heard leading up to this week and also this week people saying, well, why are you out here protesting in such force against the Democrats? Do you think the Republicans or Donald Trump would be better on the Palestine issue? And Hatem Abudaya, he's one of the lead organizers of the March on the DNC. He's with the U.S. Palestinian Community Network. And he got this exact question yesterday, and he said, look, he called the former President Donald Trump, quote, a pig. And he said, I don't support Donald Trump. I'm not advocating for anyone to vote for Donald Trump. But the fact of the matter is, it's the Democrats who are in charge right now, and they're the ones who are sending weapons to Israel.
Mm-hmm.
And so if there's going to be someone we're going to protest, it's the people currently in power. If Donald Trump was in power, he was in the White House, we would be on his doorstep instead. And so that's the sort of line he's drawing. He also told the Democrats, if you don't listen on this issue, there are so many people who care about it, it's going to make it harder for you to win in November, and don't come back and blame the Palestinians or this movement because you're the ones making these policy decisions.
Yeah, let's hear from Abbas Alawiya, who's an uncommitted delegate from Michigan, part of a sit-in outside the United Center.
As Democrats, we're the party of representation, we're the party of inclusion, and this level of silencing and exclusion is deeply, deeply offensive to us.
So we're clear, Mariah, did DNC organizers explain why they wouldn't allow a Palestinian to speak?
Not from my firsthand knowledge. I couldn't speak to any genuine reasoning that DNC officials gave. But that was the ask, right? The organizers have been asking bigger picture for an end to arms and military support and financial support to Israel and an immediate and permanent ceasefire. But this this very, very micro ask this week is kind of what led headlines, which was put a Palestinian American on stage to speak from the perspective firsthand. And I think what a lot of delegates and Democrats who I spoke to had to say, many, high-profile Democrats, first of all, joined the call on that last day for a Palestinian American, including Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson, Congressman Jesus Chuy Garcia, Congressman Delia Ramirez, Illinois State Representative Lillian Jimenez, many of them who did cast their delegate votes for Harris, so they weren't uncommitted delegates in the way that some across the country are, but said, give us a sign. They are so-called ceasefire delegates who are responsible for kind of garnering support around some of these demands inside of the United Center. And they said, the main goal isn't just stage time for a Palestinian American, but someone. But they're looking for a sign, as Nader said, that the Harris administration is listening. That some sort of sign that there will be a policy shift on Israel, because even the uncommitted delegates, they are uncommitted. That means that they can be swayed. That can change.
Right.
I think some of the people who I spoke to who are delegates for the Democratic Party, so they are cheerleaders. That's their job.
Right.
For many of them, said that they thought that Palestinians had a presence at the convention, that the war in Gaza was a topic of conversation. From my perspective, it was largely absent from this stage in a big way. Kamala Harris's speech was the first time it was kind of talked about at length, aside from quick mentions of a ceasefire.
Yeah, hence why it got all those extra cheers too.
Yeah.
In that moment, Nader.
Yeah, and the co-founder of the Uncommitted National Movement, her name's Layla Al-Abed. She made a point in this press conference, I believe Thursday morning after the sit-in started, where she said, if we can't even get a Palestinian American on stage, how are we supposed to expect policy change around Israel and Palestine? And that's something that I think is a really prevalent feeling coming out of the convention, is that, that's the simplest thing that could have happened, is let someone who's Palestinian have a voice. There's a state representative in Georgia who's Palestinian who was the sort of person that would have been on the stage to talk. And her speech called for unifying the Democratic Party, for including all people in this party, in this big tent, as Democrats have said. And if that can't happen, then how are people going to feel confident voting for the Democrats on this issue?
Let's switch gears here for a moment, because there were quite a few celebrities in town for this convention. You talked to one young actor, Lynn. Fill us in.
Well, as many celebrities were here, it was nothing compared to 2016 when Hillary Clinton ran for president. And there were relatively few celebrities on stage in the way they were there. So with that in mind, though, I did an interview. I am a big fan of young Sheldon and Big Bang Theory. I came real late to the show, so I'm, the beautiful thing about when things are live streamed, you could catch up.
Right.
But now these parts of the show are showing up in my reels, so I'm ping-ponging between different years. Anyway, I've developed, if you ever wonder what does one do to take a break,
this is what you do.
I find it, if I just want to think about something else or do it, I love the show. So when I saw that Ian Armitage, who plays young Sheldon, was here as part of the delegation from the Creative Coalition, that's an arts and entertainment industry advocacy organization, I thought, and if our listeners don't know, the whole premise of Young Sheldon, the prequel to Big Bang Theory, is that we're telling the story of this Texas-raised 13-year-old, or we go from 9 to whatever, a genius, child prodigy. So I thought, let's ask young Sheldon, who now is just 16, what it might take to get youths engaged in politics.
Did he say what he thinks the top issues were for young people?
No, but here's what. The point wasn't the issues. The point was to pay attention and find your issues. See, that's where I'm as I try to think about how what the it is here, to even get to the point to say what your issue is, you have to understand how government is organized, what a vote is, what is a convention. There are people who might not understand who was on the floor.
Right.
Delegates. I don't know if everybody knew that. There's a lot to do. Understanding just your own government. So I think that's the point, is to start to pay attention, no matter your politics.
So it sounds like you had a fruitful conversation with the young man.
Well, it was, he's very articulate and very engaging. And so I did my duty as a professional, and then I was just...
And then you fangirled.
And then you got an autograph.
Right.
No, I did not. No.
Was he actually a genius?
He's really smart. Okay, he's 16 and has a pilot's license. I mean, a junior
Oh, my gosh.
license.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so
Okay.
he's partly playing himself.
Well, you know who else I think is pretty cool? The Democrats had a party on Tuesday night and brought this guy out to help the Georgia delegation cast their votes.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are here tonight to officially nominate Kamala Harris for president. Five, get loud, another round of shots. DNC, turn out for what?
That's Little John, ladies and
Right.
gentlemen.
Window to the walls.
Window
And
to
can
the
you
walls.
imagine if that was for President Biden?
No, I can't at all.
It's comical.
Well, listen, our own governor also got the crowd riled up.
Chicago, are you ready?
Oh, and that music.
State, the great state of Illinois, the prairie state, home of 4 presidents, including President Barack Obama. The first
But here's the thing, while they were partying at the United Center, Harris and Walz were working in Milwaukee. They were holding a massive rally at the same convention center that Republicans had been at weeks earlier, Lynn.
Na.
Bold.
Oh, it was bold. The most important thing that really happened that night, that happened Tuesday night, was not that very cold roll call, was not the incredible speeches of Barack and Michelle Obama, but Harris had business to do. And she did it with her running mate at the Fisser Forum in Milwaukee. They filled it. So just think, maybe umpteen thousands in the United Center, umpteen thousands in Wisconsin, which is the crucial swing state. The road to 270 electoral votes goes through, most analysts say, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. So going up the road to whip up voters was it was not only obvious and common sense, but it just was the best use of her time.
We'll pick up the weekly news recap in just a moment with Lynn Sweet and Nader Issa of the Chicago Sun-Times and WBEZ's Mariah Woelfel. And we're back now with more Reset and more of our weekly news recap, where we look back at the week's top stories across Chicago and Illinois. I'm your host, Sasha-Ann Simons. Before the break, we took a close look at the protesters who were making their voices heard in Chicago this week. But we still got more news to cover with WBEZ City Politics reporter Mariah Woelfel, Lynn Sweet, Washington Bureau Chief for the Chicago Sun-Times, and Nader Issa, who covers education for the Sun-Times. Now, we've discussed the thousands of delegates, and the celebrities, and the protesters who were here for the DNC, but there was another group that descended on Chicago. I'm talking about the media.
Mm-hmm.
We were everywhere, right? We had a couple of correspondents right here on Reset from The Daily Show earlier this week. I mean, what did you all think about how Chicago was portrayed by national media? I had some things I was worried about before the DNC showed up, but what do you think of how it actually unfolded? Lynn?
I didn't see anything. I was busy. I was working.
I think
Okay.
Good answer.
Do you think I was
that's the
sitting
wrong
around?
crowd.
No, may I just, let everyone know. My convention day, as I'm sure it did for Mariah and everyone on the Sun-Times and BEZ cruise.
Yes.
Now, the difference would have been, I suppose, if our workspace had a TV, I would have looked up more.
Yeah.
But we didn't. But I wouldn't have focused on it. But by the way, news just in as we speak that Mayor Brandon Johnson just now issued his thank you video for his, quote, successful, safe, and vibrant national convention. And he has this on Facebook. He has a video on X, and I guess even in an old-fashioned statement on email.
Yeah,
So he's
still part of that
he's
victory
still
lap
moving
that
it, yeah.
Mariah mentioned earlier. Yeah, so I mean, as far as national coverage, I did see a little because just like you, I was busy. I think what stuck out to me was, especially when you checked out some of those late night shows, right? We know Stephen Colbert was taping here, The Daily Show was being taped here. a lot of the stereotypical Chicago,
hot dogs,
hot
and
dogs,
deep dish,
Oh my
more
God.
Hot dogs.
Italian beef,
Yeah.
deep
I
dish,
had
carrots.
more hot dogs and Italian beef at receptions and things I went to
Yes.
than I have had in a long time. And I love Italian beef. You cannot get Italian beef in Washington, D.C. So it was welcome, but
You were like,
you would
enough.
think, no, it's not enough. There's never enough Italian beef. But
Never enough
there,
Italian
there
beef.
was, I was surprised at the lack of, there's the trifecta, deep dish pizza,
Yeah.
properly steamed hot dogs, not just hot dogs, properly
grilled,
steamed.
not steamed.
What?
We need them grilled.
No, Nader.
No, no.
We're
Wow.
talking about the
Whoa,
classic
whoa, whoa.
Chicago. Hold on. Stop the show. We've got to sort this out. Chicago hot dogs are steamed.
But here's the thing, though. As we
but,
poke
but
fun.
That
we-
was, I think, all the party planners thought that these are our signature foods and that there are
Yeah.
no. I think they all thought there were no vegetables
Yeah.
available in this
I
city.
saw
There's
some
plenty of vegetables on Chicago dogs.
There's plenty of vegetables, but some of
There's
our
a salad
colleagues
on
and
top.
other folks that also,
Well, hot
they were
dog's a
being
vegetable.
they
I
were being
forgot.
outspoken about the fact
Yeah.
that they didn't go into some of the pockets, our
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
neighborhoods. They
Yeah,
didn't check
for
out our
sure.
Mexican neighborhoods or just get some other foods. So yeah, Nader, were you hearing that too?
Yeah, I mean, our colleague Natalie Moore had a tweet about this where the Daily Show, I mean, they did this tour of Chicago with the governor, and it was basically a tour of Wrigleyville and different bars and inside the ballpark. And she was saying, why not go to like Lum's Barbecue, for example? Like, go see parts of the city. Now, I do think the city was portrayed well overall because I think a lot of, at the end of the day, media came here and loved being downtown in August.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful
But also,
time.
Nader, they're national media. What else are they going to do? They have a particular audience
Yeah.
that, like, it's hard for them, I think, to go into some of the things that we know because we live here that wouldn't quite
Right,
resonate
you-
with,
you-
like, my mom who doesn't.
You do have a point. If the convention was in Boston as it was in 2004, and we were told to do some Boston story, we would probably, on food, we would probably look at the iconic foods. So that's what, it wasn't a culinary tour of Chicago in that way. But I think I know, to give credit, on the opening night media party at Navy Pier, just down the block from where we are, they were representations of other foods from
Right.
Chicago vendors.
Well, let's hit on a couple things before I let you all go. Now, this wouldn't have been a political convention without some odd stories. Lincoln Park's iconic Wiener Circle got their share of media attention. Stephen Colbert went there, too. But not just because of his visit, but because they were giving out free hot dogs to anyone who got a vasectomy outside the United Center. What, Mariah?
You're making it sound like they were incentivizing vasectomies, but really, Planned Parenthood had like a mobile truck that was providing, certain types of health care, including vasectomies and medication, abortion. I think also just like general wellness checkups. And they were near the Wiener Circle, and the Wiener Circle said, you can stop by. Was it for vasectomy specifically? I don't know, but they said you could stop by and get a hot dog to soothe your soul after your
As Michael
vasectomy.
Scott on The Office would say, snip, snap, snip, snap, snip, snap.
Oh, gosh. And while you're talking there, Nader, I want to shift gears with you because it's been a busy week for you with these protests around the convention, but you've got another story on your radar starting Monday. I'm smiling because I'm a parent.
Yeah.
School starts.
School starts. We're back. CPS is back.
But there's drama, though, right? With the teachers union, the head of CPS, and the mayor.
Yeah, we've sort of got to rewind from all the DNC coverage and get back to the CPS stuff. And yeah, there is some drama. I mean, it seems, based on our reporting last week, that Pedro Martinez, the Chicago Public Schools CEO, could lose his job anytime now. We reported that Mayor Brandon Johnson's administration is laying the groundwork to make that happen. And it's awful, awfully surprising timing given that school starts on Monday. I am going to be interested to see if the mayor and the school's CEO give their usual school tour and press conference together on the first day that they usually do. But yeah, it's another school year, another year removed from remote learning. There are a lot of budget concerns because COVID pandemic relief funding is ending, and there are also Chicago Teachers Union negotiations that they say aren't going well because of Pedro Martinez.
That's
They
right. A
blame
week
him.
ago, the teachers union asked for a mediator to help with those negotiations. So were people worried there might be a strike?
The mediation is the first step in the legal process that former Mayor Rahm Emanuel pushed to get implemented in Springfield about a decade ago. So technically, that's the first step toward a strike, but it doesn't seem that they'll go on strike with a friendly mayor and former CTU organizer and Brandon Johnson as mayor,
Yikes.
especially if he fires Pedro Martinez, who Martinez has basically said, I want to be fiscally responsible. I don't want to, put up a ton of resources into the budget that I do think will help students, but we don't have the money to pay for them yet.
Right. A few seconds left here, Mariah. Quick thoughts on the relationship between the CPS CEO and Mayor Johnson right now?
Just that. I'm definitely going to be looking out next week if they're on the trail together. What I was watching this week was Johnson's relationship with Pritzker. You didn't see them together very much at the United Center at the convention, and that I have to imagine has bleeds into the CPS conundrum of funding, and where Johnson has repeatedly tried to put pressure on the state for more funding for CPS, and so I think we're just gonna watch how that plays out.
Oh yeah, lots to watch. Well, I will let you all rest for now. That is our weekly news recap with Lynn Sweet and Nader Issa of the Chicago Sun-Times and Mariah Woelfel of WBEZ. Thank you all so much. Wonderful coverage this week.
Thank you.
And that's it for Reset. The show is produced by Meha Ahmed, Linnea Dominic, Ari Mejia, Micah Yasin, Andrea Guthman, Max Lubers, and Ellie Gilbert-Bear. Dan Tucker is our executive producer. Haley Bloomquist, Maria Lopez, and Dave Miska were our engineers this week. Now, Monday on the show, I sit down with African futurist author Nnedi Okorafor about her new book, She Who Knows. It's part sci-fi, it's part fantasy. It's a coming-of-age story of a young girl in West Africa stepping into her own power. You don't want to miss that lively conversation. I'm Sasha-Ann Simons. Thank you so much for listening. Have yourselves a wonderful weekend. Hope you get to commute around the city a lot easier now that everybody's gone. Have a good weekend. Bye.